I'm going to introduce you to our guest. I'm going to show you some of his photos while I'm doing this. Ed Kashi is an acclaimed photojournalist. He uses photography to explore social issues that define our times. Ed, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Hello. Good to see you, Mark. Thank you for having me.
I'm going to bring up the images that you sent me. Now we're coming to the most interesting shot here, I think, of our recent discussion. Composition wise, you have frames and layers. And tell us about this image. I know we were discussing it beforehand about how it appeared in National Geographic, and it was about stemming the spread of HIV.
Yeah, in India. Let me see, where do we begin? Let's begin with the photograph. So this was part of a big project that I had proposed to National Geographic in 2006 or 7, I think it was, looking at the Golden Quadrilateral Highway in India. I wasn't interested in, construction of a road. I was using it as a metaphor for how India was modernizing.
Right.
Or in some cases, what are the issues that they were dealing with? One of the issues, especially back then, thankfully it's not an issue now, was the spread of AIDS and HIV. And it was mostly being done by truck drivers. While I photographed, skits that Indian actors were performing at the truck stops to talk about the use of condoms and safe sex, I also wanted a picture that would be jarring.
Yeah.
And so, because what I want is I want to capture people's attention so then they'll read the caption. So this is in a bathhouse just outside of Bangalore along this highway. And there's a certain kind of bathhouse in India. And so I spent about a week in this bathhouse going back almost every day. The first time I went with an Indian doctor who explained who I was, why I was there, and what I was trying to do. And the folks in this bathhouse understood it, and they welcomed me. We hung out, we played dominoes together. We did we basically, I did everything you're supposed to do to get access to a situation that is otherwise not something you can just walk in and start photographing in. And so it was maybe the 5th or 6th time I had been there that all of a sudden one of the women grabbed me and brought me to this room, and the scene you see is what I saw.
Wow.
So it was one of the workers, the madame actually, who was like, I know this is what he wants. And this is a very interesting thing. This goes to the element of often I think of subjects, and I know that's a term that we're trying to get away from, but they're really more like collaborators.
Yeah.
Because if you've explained yourself properly and honestly, and you've been humble, and they understand, then there's a kind of collaboration that takes place. And so they understood what I was looking for. And when this young truck driver came in, they grabbed me and brought me to this room. And I made maybe 10 or 20 frames, something like that.
Yeah.
I think it was maybe 30 seconds. It was one of those moments in life where it felt like minutes, but was probably only seconds,
Yeah.
And then she grabbed me and took me away. So the point of this picture, and it was published in the magazine in 2008 as part of the story, was to draw attention to the efforts that were being made to stem the spread of HIV and AIDS in India.
And, I want to just speak on your behalf here for a second that the importance is that this image served a purpose, and it was published in National Geographic, and it's part of your portfolio. It has a tremendous amount of emotional impact. And because you had built that trust, and that's another big key point that we should look at. I mean, you don't just walk in 30 seconds with your camera with no trust having been established and capture this kind of image. Like you said, you had to play dominoes and build that rapport with the people, and then Madame then brought you to that image. Another example of be receptive and let the image come to you, which it did literally.
I followed like the perfect approach to having access to a sensitive subject.
Yeah.
But one of the comments that was repeated, and this is a really important one, is this idea of how would they feel if they knew their picture was being published, even if they had given you permission in the moment. And this cuts to a really, really important issue that thankfully has come up in the last, I want to say 5-ish years, maybe more, but particularly the last few years, even though it makes our job harder, which is that just because you get someone to sign a model release, or just because you get someone to say, yeah, you can photograph me, that doesn't mean they understand the implications of the use of that image.
Right.
And so while it puts tremendous burden and responsibility on us, right, because we're working so hard to get access, we get you to say yes, or we get you even to sign a model release, yet even still, we need to be careful. And so I totally get that. And I don't have a great answer to it other than what it has made me do now is I work way more carefully.
Yeah.
And I wonder, this might be weird to say this, but I wonder if today I was approaching that subject, if I'd make a picture like this. I'm not sure.
Interesting. But in this case, I just want to underscore the fact that, yes, you were given access, and in addition to that, it served a very powerful purpose. I love this image, the boy jumping over the junk that's burning. This has so many things going for it, Ed. Tell us what the story is, and then I'm going to ask you some questions about it. Because there's the guys in the background that you initially don't even see because of the smoke, but they're there. And the peak of the cathedral. I mean, okay, what's going on here? Is this in Ireland?
Yeah, this is in Northern Ireland, in Derry, or Londonderry if you're Protestant. This was from my first personal project of any significance. I spent 3 years between 1988 and 1991 going back and forth between San Francisco and Northern Ireland. So I focused on the Protestant community in Northern Ireland. That was the focus of my project, because back then and even today, I'm always looking for either underreported stories or finding a unique angle into a story that we think we all know. Yeah. So in this, especially as an American back then, you heard about the IRA, you heard about the British military, you heard about the beleaguered Catholic minority, but you never really heard stories about the Protestant community. And the more research I did and the more I came to learn about that community, I became enthralled with it, and I became enthralled with Ireland. This image was every summer they have what's called the marching season, sort of June, July, August, throughout the province of Northern Ireland, and they build these bonfires that they then set alight. And so this was, I think, the evening after when the bonfires were being lit.
It's amazing.
And these young kids were jumping over it. So I was fortunate enough to be in this place and get that moment.
All right, let's take some questions. This comes from Jared. Ed, can you speak to the tension between the sense of objectivity expected as a photojournalist in contrast to the passion of you being vis-a-vis your inner activist?
It's a good question, and it's one that comes up a lot. Look, if I'm on assignment, if I'm working for a client, whether it's the New York Times or National Geographic, Time Magazine, a foundation, an NGO, I will be objective in terms of how I approach the subject matter. And another thing that's really important is especially when you're dealing with situations where there's a security issue, or it's a hyper political or religious as well. In other words, where passions can be stirred, you really need to. I'm not a poker player because I'm way too transparent emotionally, but you really need to hold your opinions to yourself, and you need to hold your emotions, unless it's like a human moment where someone has died or something, universal, or there's a marriage and you can certainly smile and be happy. But anyway, so you really need to hold that stuff in, because you can actually destroy your access or ruin, or also, ethically, like if you're working for publications, you need to have an objective posture. Otherwise, you're just not being professional.
Right.
Now, when I'm working on my own projects, or when I'm working on like advocacy work, even though I'll still keep it in check because I don't want to offend anyone, or ruin my access, or endanger myself, then I can be a little more subjective, if you like. But another way I'd like to answer that question is that, damn it, there are issues in the world, and I'm sorry, there aren't two sides to it.
Yeah.
There's a problem, and it needs to be fixed.
Yeah. Brilliant. Ed, thanks again.
All right.
I really appreciate having you back on the show. We probably will want to do it again because I know you got a lot more to talk about, and I certainly have more questions. So be well. I'll ping you later after the show.
All right. Take care, man. Be well.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Be well, everyone.
Subscribe if you haven't already done that. Enable the bell. Share this video. Share it when it comes out. Like it. Leave your comments. I love you guys. Thank you for joining us. And remember to get out and capture your own images of life.